morning and welcome to St Margaret's, Dunfermline. Our service will be starting shortly.
But I suspect this will be quite popular, so you might want to agree with someone who you're going to pass it on to after you've read it. So I'll leave them there, or I may take them to the front door for next. Okay, let's sing our first hymn together this morning. Hymn 1, 2, 3. God is love, let him adore him. when we have turned to dust and human understanding has been completed, God will be. So not despairing of earth, but delighting in it, not condemning the world, but redeeming it. Through Jesus Christ and by the power of the Holy Spirit, God was, God is, and God will be. Amen. I think we're bereft of youngsters this morning. You're going to stay with us? Good. Well, you must regard yourselves as youngsters. When you listen to Channel 4 and Channel 5 on TV, I think one or two of the others as well, now that I think about it, often in the evening we get what's called a 90-second update on the news. And it's quite clever when you think that other news bulletins go on for half an hour, or Channel 4's main news goes on for an hour. But here, in a matter of seconds, 90 seconds usually, or 60 seconds, they can rattle off 3 or 4 headline news items, highly focused, and it sticks with us. So I want to, in this jam slot, give you a very short and punchy message, I hope. And I'm going to do that with the aid of a short video. I was out, I'm quite a keen gardener, I've got quite a big garden, and this is a great time of year because you start clearing all the herbaceous stuff and the like, and you can see what's on the ground around you for a while. And turning over a stone, a big stone, a rock, because I thought, I'm not sure it's in the right place, this happened, this sort of thing happened. You're going to play it again, do you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Watch them go. What are you doing? Is that sound? I think that's a different one. That's all right. I didn't have quite as many as that. Absolutely incredible. And I guess when I've turned over stones and the like, I've also seen earthworms, and they wriggle away or start to move. And every time I've done this, and it's not the first time, it's made me think, what if anything do those ants or those earthworms actually see? And the answer, I think, is that they don't see anything. But they sense something going on around them. They sense my presence. But they have no real idea of what's coming next, what I'll do. And what I was going to say to the youngsters was, in a sense, that's like us and God. We cannot see God. He is far greater, bigger than us. But hopefully, we sense Him. And we sense Him when He touches our lives, just as I touch the lives of other saints. So hold that thought in your mind, because I'm going to be speaking a bit later on about the question of God sing again. I'm going to sing a song from Mission Praise, 709. To Him we come, and we're omitting verse 3. You might be relieved that I'm going to split this sermon message in two parts. we can all get up halfway through or so and sing again. I was asked a few weeks ago by a member of the congregation if I would try and speak on the question of why does God allow evil in our world, and why doesn't He stamp it out? It's a question that we've probably all asked ourselves at some point. It's a very difficult question. I won't pretend that it is probably the most difficult question I've thought about since I came to this role. It's also challenged theologians and philosophers for centuries. And I think reaching any sort of conclusion depends much on your personal theology. If we take a literalist view of Scripture, if you're evangelic-minded, we will see evil and its agents one way. If you take a more liberal or interpretative view, and that's more to where I lean, we will see evil and its agents in another way. So I think that's code for saying there is no one answer to this question. We will all find different answers depending on where we come from, spiritually speaking. But I was very keen to try and answer the question that was put to me, and so I wound right back as far as I could. So 2 important points to touch on. First of all, what actually is evil, and where and how did it emerge? What actually is it, and where did it emerge from? Some neurologists will argue that evil is an outdated concept. It's caused by some glitch or malfunction in our heads. It's the way our brains are wired, if you like. Some medical practitioners, on the other hand, will say there are pathological reasons for the evil behind our behaviour. There's a chemical or a genetic deficiency which distorts or destroys our ability to empathise with one another or be good. And then you find some psychologists argue that the influences around us in everyday life affect and lead us into persistent and harmful wrongdoing. And as science and medicine advances at the pace it is, I don't think we can discount such arguments. And then you have some notable individuals who have argued that there is no such thing as evil. No such thing. In other words, it doesn't exist. It's not stuff that we can grab hold of. As far back as St. Augustine, he concluded that evil has no positive nature. And what it is the absence of good, and has simply acquired this name, evil. But if we look, as Christians we should, into the Bible and look at the theological evidence, that's where we have other options available to us. So if we look in Genesis, which means beginning, and the very first words there in Genesis are, in the beginning. The first 3 chapters tell us of God's initial intervention in our world as we know it, and his action as humanity spreads to save us from ourselves and the mess we have made of things. God was there in the beginning, and even before that. And for me, I think there are indications that forces, matter, energy also existed, including deep waters. Although everything was in a chaotic form or state. In Genesis chapter 1, just at the second verse, it says, "In the beginning, when God created the universe, the earth was formless and desolate. The raging oceans that covered everything was engulfed in total darkness, and the Spirit of God moved across the waters." We don't know how the universe started, despite various scientific theories like the Big Bang. The authors of Genesis didn't know either. I think they would have been content to record that out of chaos came order and harmony. An order and a harmony that has amazed physicists and cosmologists to this day. And many scientists acknowledge that cosmic order could not have happened by accident. Einstein spoke of a spiritual architect with a design, with a plan. The authors of Genesis would not have had a problem either, I don't think, with the concept of evolution. That our world has taken millions of years to evolve, or that we are just one of thousands, tens of thousands of galaxies. They only wanted to convey creation had its origins in the mind and purpose of a divine or supreme being. So throughout the creation, there was God. And in Genesis we see, when God created everything, it was all good, just as He intended. Light and dark, day and night, sun and stars, land and sea, they were all good. Vegetation, trees, fruit, seeds, on which animals, birds and fish would feed, God saw they were all good. And then finally, humanity, you and me, God made us and saw we were good. By the end of the process, as described in Genesis, we read, put it up. Then God looked over all that He had made, and He saw that it was very good. At no point is there any mention of God creating what we call evil. So what is it? And where did it emerge from? In the beginning, I don't think God created everything out of nothing. And it was not a single act. It took time. And it has been an endless process of reenactment and reassertion of God's sovereign will over frustrated and chaotic forces found throughout creation, in nature as well as humanity. It has been, and indeed remains, a titanic cosmic struggle, seen for us in the natural forces such as earthquakes and tsunamis, where destructive powers show themselves, and what we call cruel and evil. And for me, the Apostle Paul speaks of that struggle. In Romans chapter 8, he says, "For we know that all creation has been groaning, like in childbirth, right up to the present time." But throughout, God has and will continue to prevail. And such forces will be subdued. Nature will be freed. And finally, be what God intends. But how did evil infect you and I? How did it infect humanity? Well, before we think a bit about that, let's have that break from my voice. And we're going to sing again. Let's stand and sing, get the blood circulating again. We're going to sing hymn 486. Forgive our sins as we forgive. Well, the first biblical clue is at the start of Genesis 3, when the serpent appears, which in tradition has been dubbed Satan in disguise. Well, immediately that gave me a challenge. I wonder if it challenges you. What are we to make? What do we make of those biblical creatures such as the serpent, Satan, and the devil? Well, I interpret them as images used by the ancient authors of Genesis to help people at that time understand the story. But of course, I respect those, and perhaps you're one of them, who see the serpent, Satan, the devil, as actual creatures, as actual individuals. And to support that view, you might argue that Jesus himself personalized these creatures. In John's Gospel, Jesus speaks of Satan as the prince of the world. The prince. Paul, in his letter to the Corinthians, speaks of Satan as the god, small g, the god of this world or age. And in Ephesians, he refers to him as the prince of the power of the air. And the other apostle, Peter, in his first letter, speaks of Satan as going to and fro on the earth, walking up and down on it. Well, I prefer to think of the serpent, Satan, and the devil not as creatures or individuals as such, but as malevolent spiritual forces at work in and around us. But however we see those dark forces, it is the serpent in Genesis that provides the very first sign of evil afflicting humanity. And he does so in the form of temptation. I'm going to watch another short video here. This was helpfully suggested to me by Morna. If any of you are fans of Lord of the Rings, the movies, you will be familiar with this little clip.
I will give you the One Ring. You offer it to me freely. I do not deny that my heart has greatly desired this. In place of a dark lord, you would have a queen, not dark but beautiful and terrible as a lord.
Power, the tempting power of the ring. And for a moment or two, the queen was almost drawn into it. And I actually put the hairs up in the back of my neck the first time I saw it. You see that evil power possessing the queen and tempting her, but she pulls back, she holds back, and as she said, she passes the test. In Genesis, that's what we see, the sly, commanding voice or force that contradicts the commanding voice of God. That seductive, adversarial force that upsets order and harmony, distracting us from what is right and good. It was temptation the serpent first used to lure and turn the heads of Adam and Eve. It was temptation that led them to defy God and all that was good and lead all of us down a sinful path. Next challenge, though. What do we believe about Adam and Eve? Well, I don't believe historical figures. Instead, I think they were used, again by the authors, to represent humanity generally, from our first parents right down to the present day, and how we can all succumb at some time to the powerful forces of temptation and what we desire, power or whatever it is. There's that titanic struggle that I mentioned earlier. There it is again, but this time played out in the hearts of humanity. But that still leaves unanswered the questions about why allow evil? Why doesn't God stamp it out and the misery it causes? Well, God made us conscious creatures, like all the other animals. But He also made us self-conscious beings, able to think and reflect on the meaning of our lives. And this carries the risk of us using that freedom for self-interest. Remember, when God first created humanity, there was no bad stuff in them, only good. But we were created with the capability to turn away from God and do our own thing, as well as the capability to choose to do wrong. And in the story of Adam and Eve, that is exactly what they did. Unlike the Queen in The Lord of the Rings, temptation got the better of Adam and Eve. And they ate. Can you believe it? They ate from the one tree in the garden that God said, don't touch it. I'm sure God has good reasons for tolerating evil, even temporarily. It causes immense suffering. But St. Thomas Aquinas observed, it also serves the greater good. Personal virtues which would not exist without evil. Virtues like mercy, forgiveness, heroism, patience, perseverance, self-control, and I could go on. But we are bound to ask, as humans, is it worth it? Is it all worth it? Is it worth God giving us freedom? Freedom to make choices, be they good or bad? And I'm sorry, the only answer I could come up with is only God knows the answer to that question. He must clearly believe, on balance, that good does outweigh evil, or he wouldn't allow it to happen. And we are like the ants under the stone in my garden. Best summed up by Paul in his letter to the Corinthians. He said this: now we see things imperfectly, but then, later, when Christ returns, we will see everything with perfect clarity. All that we know now is partial and incomplete. But then, I will know everything completely. I want to finish by touching on the question, the final question, which is about, and it's our challenge today, every one of us, is how to combat the evil around us as long as it exists. I think our sinful and evil behaviour exposes our vulnerability and our utter dependence on God, whether we are the perpetrators of violence and evil or the victims of it. But thankfully, we are loved by a good God, and that should give us a sense of personal security. And thankfully, because none of us are wholly good, we all fall short. We have a Saviour in Jesus Christ, whose grace and forgiveness we can always see. And just as we are loved, so we have a responsibility to love others and thereby help one another resist the temptations which lead to so much misery. God assures us evil is temporary. It will have no place at some point in the future or in the next life. It will be overcome. It will be erased forever. Amen. So be it. I hope that lets you take away the topic of evil and try working that for yourself. It's a difficult one. We're going to sing again in the hymn 509. I chose this one because it's the run-up to St. Andrew's Day later this week. Jesus calls us for the tumult, and while we take up the offering, while we sing, let's take up the offering and remain seated.
All that is necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Heavenly Father, we know that doing nothing is easy. Help us to see the danger of it. Where there is no opposition to evil, it multiplies. We all fall into the trap of complaining about things that are wrong in society and in life. But complaining does nothing except discourage us even more. It changes nothing because there is no power for good in it. Help us to trust the power of prayer to help and heal lives damaged by the acts of others or by selfish pride within themselves. Help us to understand that you work through your people and show us how much more we could achieve if our love for others and our commitment to you were only strong enough. You call us to your service. Forgive our pride when we care more about ourselves than our neighbours. Give comfort, Lord, to all who are torn away from their homes and their loved ones by war, famine, or the cruelty of others. We remember again this morning Leah Sharibu in Nigeria, who is still in the hands of Boko Haram. And we renew our prayers that her struggle has not been in vain, and that she may still be allowed to return to her family. Help all those who have been belittled by others, all who have no confidence in themselves because of harsh words or unfeeling deeds, all who are fearful of speaking out against abuse or violence, all who are living in places of oppression and conflict. Hold out your hand to them and remind them of the promise made to Isaiah when you said, "Do not be afraid, I will save you. I have called you by name. You are mine." God of hope, we cannot escape the fact that evil continues to exist in the world. That is the reality. Jesus showed us through his own suffering and death that life is full of pain and sorrow and can be an uphill climb, often without much support or comfort. However, that very suffering also showed us that the hill could be climbed and that the possibility of overcoming evil with good was more than just a fanciful idea, but could be made our new reality if we can turn towards you and away from vanity and greed. Help us never to forget the injustices of the past, the horrors of the Holocaust or the devastation of genocide. Enable us to join the fight for a world where all such injustice is a thing of the past. May the example of all who died as a result of the actions of others draw us closer to you and strengthen our resolve to serve the unwanted of the world, wherever we may find them. Lord, you search us and you know us. Examine and test us and understand the fear which often prevents us from making a stand when we see things are wrong. Let your healing grace transform us so that the problems in our lives, whether caused by our own uncaring behaviour or that of others, become opportunities to demonstrate our determination to walk in your way as witnesses of your everlasting love, both now and in the future. Amen.
Thank you, Heather. I couldn't have you leaving the building having talked about evil. Couldn't have you leaving all down and concerned and worried. So we're going to close with a good hymn. It's from Mission Praise. Our eyes have seen the glory. It's a slightly different version to the one that you might be familiar with, but it's still sung to that great tune, the Battle Hymn. So let's stand and sing, "Our eyes have seen the glory." behind us and before us. God, who brought us into the light, bless and guide us in all that we do this coming week.